Episode 10 of the Order and Chaos podcast. Still in June, they're still rebelling against the LGBTQ, RSPCA, whatever nonsense. It's just, it's just become ridiculous now, isn't it? So this month it's Toxic Masculinity Month for the month of June, and that's the theme for the podcast. I'm just saying, this one might be a little bit low speed and a bit full of disparity because of fatigue kicking in, but we'll make it as interesting as possible. And this is the second tenet, isn't it? So this is what did we decide to call it? Choose the path least trodden. Otherwise known as comfort kills, I guess. So I just wanted to start off, and I've got my books laid out, David. It's just not as well pieced together as perhaps the previous one.
I've done 5 minutes of research on the internet. I've come up with one really good quote.
The most important thing, though, is what both viewers wait for, is the creme de la creme at the end, and your funny reflection of the world.
You know, I've gotten out exciting, so I was just going to close with my quote that I found for Toxic Masculinity Month. I'm going to have a quote from a fucking real toxically masculine man. So, I like to just leave it on it. Yeah.
Right, so Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, about a guy that survived the concentration camps in Nazi Germany, and he later went on to be like a psychologist and taught as a professor. It's quite an interesting book if anybody wants to read it, a deep book. And so I just thought I'd start with this. If there's meaning in life at all, then there must be a meaning in suffering. Suffering is an irreducible part of life, even as fate and death. Without suffering and death, human life cannot be complete. Now, it's a bit deep, obviously, and a bit sort of morbid. But in the modern times, certainly since the advent of the internet, social media, streaming TV, we don't like to suffer anymore. Everything's got to be comfort, and everything's got to be efficient and at the reach of our fingertips. And this is where I think society's fallen down. This is what I think a problem is with the month that we're recognising at the moment. The fact that people have got too comfortable and that people are too scared of feeling a little bit of pain and suffering. What's your thoughts?
I don't know where to start really on that. Thoughts on the personal bit, like both you and I haven't succumbed to that, have we?
I would like to think not. Yeah, I mean, Generation X, we're from a different time, aren't we?
And I don't think the paths that we took, very similar ones, wasn't it? Like you with mixed martial arts and me with boxing, basically just fighting. We took a tough path, didn't we? Because I think there is still a small proportion of men that have got that in them, and it's obviously like our peer group, isn't it? As far as people we know, but it's just becoming diluted, isn't it? It's diluted by the media, for starters, isn't it? I honestly don't know. People say there's estrogen in the drink and what and that. I'm not a fucking scientist, mate. I can't tell you out about that. One scientist will tell you there is, one scientist will tell you there isn't. None of us are ever going to know. But you do know that attitude is like sort of demasculized, if that's even a word. Like, and that thing of like, like the hard-working man, like the hard-working, tough, honest man, that's been thrown aside, hasn't it? For like some fucking soft, poncy prima donna. And obviously, like, if that's like your route to doing well, kids are looking at that and thinking, well, why would I fucking work hard and do something really hard when I can do what that soft cunt's done? And he's probably making more money. You look at these reality TV stars and they absolutely fucking sicken me, like. You know what I'm like about them. I would have Big Brother with fucking rabid wolves and that going in the house, me. Because if you want to go through that and be one of them, you deserve to be eaten by fucking rabid wolves. But you know, kids look at that. They look at them fucking wankers on Geordie Shore and things like that, and that fucking only wears Essex, who for some reason just got really simple lads where they just fuck about for a living, and they've never done anything to earn it, have they? Look at who we looked up to. Look at just again, and this is all the stuff we talked about in the podcast in lockdown, isn't it? Look at role models. Look at who we looked up to. Rocky, brilliant fucking 80s role model, one of the ultimate boys 80s role models. And it was just, the whole thing was Rocky will work so fucking hard he will win. And the glory will be massive. And people will fucking cry and every kid will want to beam and that. And it was awesome, wasn't it? What are the role models now? Because everything like that, even like, they'll never make a film, like, unless things massively change, they'll never make anything as gritty and real as that again, will they? Do you know what I mean? That's like as honest. Because everything now is like, I don't know, everything's got to be ritzy and glamorous, hasn't it?
You'd like to think that things like that would tap into some kind of forgotten intrinsic feeling in men, and it's just clouded at the moment, isn't it? With this sort of like what you said there, this sort of fanciful freelance lifestyle where you don't have to pay any dues. You just try your luck on making YouTube videos. Ironically, what we're doing now, no, but ultimately people think that it's an actual job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just going to be simple. You start making videos and getting famous.
Just
Like,
for the viewers, I know you'll find it hard to believe we aren't full-time YouTubers. We just do it on a Sunday night from our back bedrooms.
yeah, well, that's right. And but hopefully, if someone had the balls to do it, I mean, you would have to be like an independent sort of studio or filmmaker, wouldn't it? Because we all know the conspiracy rabbit hole of things like Hollywood and things like and Disney and things like that, mate. We'll probably never allow it anymore because ultimately the elites, you know, they want you sick, they want you eating sugary, fatty, processed foods as much as you can. They want you weak. They condemn masculinity and promote, you know, all this fucking the thing that we're opposing this month. They want you passive. So are they really introducing testosterone blockers in the food or things that reduce testosterone over time?
None of that would surprise you. Do you know, and I'm certainly not saying that I don't think that's happening. I'm just saying I can't prove nothing like that. Do you know,
You just have,
conspiracy theorists, are we? Do you know, we're not sort of deep down conspiracy rabbit holes or anything, are we? I think we're just sort of quite pragmatic and open-minded.
I just think you've got to believe your eyes. You've got to believe what you see.
Well, yeah, because the evidence obviously shows
that
the average man is a much bigger pussy than in the 80s or even the 90s. The thing about, like, I don't give a fuck what anyone thinks. People can change their mind as they get older. Little lads should be brought up to be little lads, and little lasses should be brought up to be little lasses. My little lass, who's nearly 20 now, was brought up as a little lass who did martial arts for years and hung about in the gym with all those lot. Do you know what I mean? Now, she's as girly as anybody when she goes out and that. She still likes lifting the lads in the gym with the lads. You know, she's still in the lifting that, isn't she? It doesn't, you know, like, just because you're a girly girl doesn't have to mean you've got to fucking ride a pony and do a tap dancing, doesn't it? Just because you're a boy's boy doesn't mean you've got to be a fighter or whatever. But you should be brought up to be, a boy should be brought up to be masculine and strong and dependable and loyal and honest. And things like that are just fucking cast along the wayside as long as they're fucking passive. That's what they want, isn't it? They just want them to be passive. And like, to knock all that masculinity out of little lads before they get a chance to fucking blossom. That's why I love having kids in the gym. That's why I love, like, you know, the kids that come to the gym and really sort of start to get it, the ones that really get it. I love it because, you know, like, you look at some of the ones that we know at the minute that we've talked about lately. Look at the fine young men they've turned into. And they've turned into proper men. Do you know what I mean? Like, You know, I've seen loads of young lads having it past few years when I've been on the doors in the clubs and that, and I've met some great ones, but I look at some of them and fuck me, what a shower. So all the ones that have come through the gym, who have again taken that path less trodden and done something that was a lot tougher than all the mates did. They've turned into fucking great young men, haven't they? You know, they've turned into young lads. You'd be pleased if your daughter brought them home.
There's many examples of it, isn't there?
Loads of them.
So again, there's that thing about the drop in testosterone, isn't it? Over the last 40 years, they reckon the levels have dropped 1% every year from our sort of ancestors' previous levels at 40 years ago. And there's got to be a reason for it, whether it's just a naturally occurring thing or whether it's been sort of implemented nefariously by covert means by the elite to try and dumb down this this path of resistance that masculine men would sort of put up. So with regards to choose the path least trodden, do you think that society is, how do I word this? I'm trying to think. Do you think it's a warring society currently, or interspersed with moments of civility, or do you think we're a civilized society interspersed with moments of war?
I don't think we're a civilized society, are we? Look at that video that was floating on socials last week of that young lad in Scotland getting fucking hacked to bits in the street with machetes. We are not a fucking civilized society anymore. I don't know whether we ever have been. I don't know whether societies have ever really like been that sort of, you know, like this civilization, this like paragon of perfection. Everybody's nice to each other. That's never been civilization, has it? That isn't how it works. So, like, civilization is dirty and horrible, isn't it? Like, think of like indigenous people. So again, look at like the Plains Indians. Yeah, indigenous people just lived off the land and that. No sort of organised sort of civilization as such was seen as uncivilized, weren't they? But they all had like laws that no one really broke. Do you know what I mean? There was certain things that like no one's that big enough of a cunt to do really. Like maybe even them one absolute fucking head the ball. They were more civilized. If you look at what civilizations meant to be, all them cultures were more civilized. They weren't robbing and stealing and fucking nonsense and raping each other and that, were there? There's none of that.
I think within their own smaller communities they were all civilized, definitely. But even like between the different tribes of, I don't know, the only two I know really, the Apaches and the Comanches, they were still massively what do you call it, debauched in their war and their activities in war.
But you know what? Hasn't everyone done that in war? That's war. Like people think that things like don't go like there's all that stuff like from like the Eastern Front in the Second World War, all the rapes and things like that, and no one talks about it, do they? That when China had that war with Russia at the start of like the last century, like 100 years ago, whatever it was, things like the rape of Nanking and things like that. It doesn't really get talked about, does it? Because it's not like nice, is it? It's not something you put a telly program on at 8 o'clock on a fucking Monday night, is it? Mass rapes and mass murders. Like, so you don't put it in kids' history books, do you?
Mm.
Kids just learn fluffy fucking bollocks in history, don't they? Do you know what I mean? They don't learn about things like that, so they think it doesn't happen. What the Apaches and the Sioux and that live on each other in wars and what they done to white people in wars. Look at what we did to them.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, look at what like American soldiers did to them. You know, they smashed babies' heads in with rifle butts and that, didn't they? To save bullets. Things like that. So all countries are like that in war. And that's not me going like, oh, like white men were awful. Everyone is awful in war, aren't they? You know, like especially like it's all better off, isn't it, really, when you're out there? Neither of us has ever been there, have we?
No.
But anybody who's been in like a really long, prolonged sort of drawn out war and spent a lot of time there will have seen some fairly fucking horrific things that they probably don't tell people back home about.
So that would sort of fall nicely then to say that sort of war or warring part of the human psychology is the baseline psychology, like might is right type of thing, isn't it? And we've had sort of civility bred into us.
Well, let's be honest. I've always said that, like, because people would say to me, "Well, somebody doing," and I'll be saying, "This one's a fucking good hiding." And folk always say to me, "Well, violence doesn't solve everything," but it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, it does.
Got the most capacity for violence is the person who's in charge.
Yes.
So, yeah. So they decide for some reason that they're going to make us pay me parking tickets. Yeah, all in one paper. And I just say, no, fuck you. I'm not paying them. And they'll send things like summonses for us to go to court and that. And I say, no, fuck you, I'm not doing that neither. Eventually they'll send people to my house, wouldn't they? Yeah. And if I said to them, no, fuck you, I'm not coming, they'd drag us off. And if I tried to resist, they'd subdue us with violence and make us do it. Yeah, that's how everything runs, isn't it? If like the only real way, like say like people really wanting to stop Putin, people just can't say to Putin, "You stop that, or we'll come fill you in your country," because Russia is too powerful of a country. If it was fucking Suriname invading somewhere like America could just go, "Suriname, you fucking behave," or we'll come and fucking cap upon you, like we've done to all loads of other like them Arab countries and that, like we did to Iraq, and then wind the neck in. Because violence ultimately solves everything. Every human problem can be solved with violence.
Yeah, it can. And so that leads on to two things. So, firstly, that the war and violence is innate in humans. And secondly, that's why it's more important to choose the path least trodden and to make yourself the most resilient person you can by choosing the difficult option. Now here we go. There's a reason why all these myths and legends, revere these super tough guys. One of the earliest ones either ever sort of passed down through oral records or written records was Heracles, or Hercules in Roman. So Heracles was obviously the son of Zeus and a human mother. So Zeus, obviously king of the gods, had his way with Heracles' mother, disguised himself as her husband, and he was a bit of a philanderer, wasn't he, old Zeus, and a bit of a swordsman. And the start of the Heracles story.
Waiter on holiday.
That's where they must get it from, mustn't it? they all like got Zeus as the middle name. Well, at the start of the story, he's sent out into the wilderness like the Spartans do with their kids. The records are that he's sent out into the wilderness with nothing, but he had that much strength because he was half god, half human. He tore up an olive tree and carved his club out of the olive tree, and he came to a fork in the road, and there was one way the goddess Kaki, which was like vice, and the other way was arete, which was virtue. And obviously the temptation to go with Kaki was all beauty and drink, and you'll be a king and you'll live the life of leisure. And the other way was, no, it's hard work, but once you achieve, once you climb the top of the mountain, it's more worthwhile. And he chooses obviously the way of arete, of prosperity and hard work. And that's going back, what, 3,000 years, 2,500 years, something like that.
Yeah.
And it's lasted all this time and passed down legend to, through generation, this legend of this guy who chose the hardest way. So there's something to be said. Now he goes on, obviously, he does those 12 labours, doesn't he? He's tricked into believing his wife and kids are demons, so he slaughters them all. And then he has to go on like a trial of retribution and do all these 12 labours, fighting monsters and going up against hardships.
The Hydra and the Lion and all of it.
Yeah, it's basically 12 trials of either, but it's the king that sets it, isn't it? I don't think the king likes him. I can't remember what the king's name is now, but the king doesn't like him, and the king sets in these labours thinking he's going to fail at every turn. But through sheer perseverance and whatever, and the from lessons he's learned from the previous times, he takes on board and learns how to deal with these hardships, which is what I think he's missing from. It's like a nice sort of metaphor for modern times where we've got that much comfort and convenience that we're just turning into these sort of passive, effeminate, emotional. I don't hasten to say men, but it's the way it is, and it's like what Lasso said. I don't know if you've ever seen the clip. She's like a historian that studied like the decline of empires over the years. She says I think she's a bit of a lesbian herself, but she says there's a common theme where when empires or civilizations that have lasted a long time are coming to their end, just because they've gotten too big for one reason or another, they've spread themselves too thin. Everything just turns effeminate and androgynous. There's no more worship of the sort of heroic warrior. It's more about equality and an acceptance of all these weird, strange, fringe things that then come into the center. And it's like, fuck me, are we not in a period of time now where that's so evident? And what happens?
There's that saying, isn't it? No one wants a warrior till the enemy's at the gates. And
Yeah.
like now, isn't it? Like the man's man, the real man, is like undervalued now, aren't they? By some people, not by all, by some people.
And the barbarians, and I don't know what the barbarians are in terms of the West. Maybe you consider it Russia, China, Brazil, South Africa, this BRICS thing that's going to take over the US dollar, whatever. I don't know how you describe it. I don't know what the metaphor would be for modern times. Obviously, in the past, it's like the Germanics for the Roman Empire, for instance. It was the Romans for the Greeks, and it was the Greeks for the what they call it, the pre-Iranians, the Persians. So it's never been more important that we choose this path least trodden, and obviously, I think you do a good job of being a role model for it with the gym and stuff. Like you said, like you hinted at before. But people like to see a strong role model, don't they?
I think so, yeah, and I do think it's important, and I think, again, it's one of the reasons that we're doing this and sort of setting our stall out publicly a bit, isn't it? Because we both feel it's important to talk about it, and if a few young lads listen, just take a bit of fucking it, that'll do, won't it? You said about the way the world's getting, and the other sort of saying that comes to mind right away is better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war, isn't it? The world is a fucking horrible, tough, grim and nasty place, isn't it? I wouldn't want to feel defenceless. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't want to feel weak and feeble and defenceless. You're talking about the barbarian hordes. Maybe the barbarian hordes are internal. Because look at the Walking Dead and that. Look at them. It maybe isn't another culture that's going to just clatter us. It's maybe our own from inside. Do you know what I mean? And think, you think of that like, maybe I'm being a bit mean calling the Walking Dead. But all the addicts and all the plonkies and that you see potting about the state of them, like nothing's stopping the growth of that, isn't it? It's just getting wider and wider and wider. And think when the government makes us all poor, they will swell and swell, won't they? Because that's one of the things that leads to like problems like that, isn't it? Like running out of money and financial worries. That leads to like drug dependency and that, doesn't it? Which leads to homelessness. You see all this in California now. California just looks fucked. It's been the place where when we were kids, you dreamed of going there because it was fucking rock and roll and sunshine. It looked like fucking heaven. Now it does look like fucking Escape from LA, doesn't it?
Yeah. With the crime and the drug problems and the homelessness.
I think we mentioned this before, but remember, not so long ago, we were looking, you watched telly, and crack was only in New Jack City and like Boys in the Hood. And now it's down the bottom end of town. And so, like, the same thing like hordes of homeless, and like hordes of drug addicts and that, it'll get worse, so you won't it, because it will follow suit, just like America. And I reckon some places in America now are absolutely fucked because there's so many homeless people and so many addicts and that in the city centres, that there's so much crime that both big and small businesses are pulling out. So there's going to be sort of fuck all left. So like small business owners won't have small businesses, so they'll be unemployed. There'll be no big businesses employing anybody. So you won't have like the normal people. You won't have the people that work. You'll just have the people that don't work, and the people who do like the higher up jobs, who live in them sort of gated communities and that in America. And again, that's the very beginning of that, isn't it? You know, of that sort of like escape from LA kind of vibe, like the posh, rich, fortunate people are in the private estates, and like downtown is like a fucking no-go zone. You know what I mean? And probably enforced very strongly by the police, who if they catch people from downtown going towards uptown, probably got a fairly strong fuck off back downtown.
Yeah, well, I mean, it'll be like, what's that film? Oh fucking hell, it's gone right up my head. I'll come back to it. But ultimately, those that can afford it will hire private security. The police will be practically defunded, and anybody that wants to take up a bit of vigilantism will be classified as a criminal. Did you see that guy on the was it the New York subway? There's a black lad. He was clearly a bit mental, and he got violent on the subway with a couple of people, and just so happened to be a retired Marine on the subway at the time. And he was threatening this, that, and the other. And he was saying, "I'll go to jail. I don't care. I'll rob you of all your money." And this, and the Marine just choked him out. Unfortunately, he choked him out for a bit long, and he ended up killing him. But what made it even worse was the Marine was white, and the guy was black. So it was almost.
Oh well, it was obviously a racist then.
Exactly. Yeah, but that's. But you know what, Dave? That's the card that was pulled. But,
well, it doesn't even surprise you, does it?
But the point I was going to make was that's how they breed it out of you, to be resistant. Because if you do something and stick up for people that can't stick up for themselves, you'll get punished for it.
Yeah.
So it breeds it out of people to be resilient. But it shouldn't. It should be more important now than ever for people to be able to either physically, and if you can't physically because of the way nature made you, then you should be able to speak. And this is what, alluding to our previous podcast, the art of communication. You should be able to talk and communicate effectively. And half the time, you don't even have to raise your hands in anger. You could probably bluff it, and as long as you know how to talk, do you know what I mean? You could very easily talk people down.
I know I said before, violence solves everything. There is obviously a plan A before you get to that, isn't there? Do you know what I mean? Like, I would much rather solve most things. Sometimes I would just like to punch someone's fucking head in, to be honest. But most of the time, you would rather solve it amicably, wouldn't you? Just the 49% of the time that you want to punch someone's head in.
So, to choose the path least trodden, so I think we've gone off on a different tangent, but just to keep it short and sharp, there's all this stuff's based on books I've read, primarily the Jordan Peterson stuff. There's a rule number 7 called pursue what is meaningful and not what is expedient. So essentially, we're that distracted with what's easy and what's convenient that we forget about our future selves. And this is where obviously the training, the inspiration, being a role model comes in, where it's critical. You put things off that are expedient, anything that's easily achievable, you can delay the gratification for so long. You don't need it. But in modern day, you've got the apps on your phone, you've got access to porn at the the click of a button. You've got food can be delivered at the drop of a click of a button. Everything's just within arm's reach, isn't it? But if you can employ some kind of sacrifice, in delay delay your instant gratification, you can build up your moral fortitude and become stronger, and then it becomes like a consistent thing. But I think it's something that needs drilled home to sort of the generation after us, the Gen Y, Gen Z, millennials. It just seems to be missing, and it doesn't take long to to drill this out of people.
So here's one. So when you think about taking the path less travelled and making the tough choice, here's my advice to all young men, and you'll second this, I'm sure, because it's something that we've both always done. I was talking to Scarlett, right? You know, who drew the picture, the tattoo guy. And we were saying something, and I says to him, I says, just think, Stephen, I says, of all the good, all them early mornings have done me, because obviously we always train in the morning, don't we? And I says, look at, I said, something about look at what it's done for us. And he laughed and he says, yeah, your body's fucked and you look ancient. And he's obviously right, isn't he? But I tell you what, would I swap it? Or would you swap it for the same thing? You wouldn't, would you? Because how much stronger of a person has it made you? Every morning, getting up in the fucking dark to go and do something that most cunts won't do at any time of the day. When they're not tired, when they haven't got to drag the fucking ass out of bed to do it at the crack of dawn. It's that tough that most people won't do it anyhow. Drag ourselves out of bed and do it. So my advice to all young men, get your fucking ass out of bed in the morning and do something tough to start your fucking day. Don't get up and go to work. Get up and do something tough. Get up and train for whatever you want to do. You don't have to be a fighter or anything like we were, but get up and do something fucking tough and kickstart your day. Because 20 years from now, you'll thank us. Boom.
Yeah. It's probably a good way to finish. Yeah, no, I think it's a good way to finish. I was gonna read a couple of quotes, but I think we'll just finish there, mate. I think I don't think there's any need to. That's it. Choose the path least trodden. Do yourself a favour. Your future self will thank you for it, and your future kids will thank you for it. And if your parents, when you get older, will thank you for it as well. And anybody that aspires or looks up to you will thank you for it, because you'll show them the path that's least trodden.
That's
and
right.
You'll motivate them to do the same thing. The end.